What's up? What's up, my gang? My homies. Hello, stylish veil. It's been some time. Whoop whoop. Indeed, it's been way too long. Yeah. So if you say so. Hi, Nikki. Hello, lovely human, and baby Penguino and people. Yeah, and Esme being in both chats. Impressive. A lot of coordination it takes to do that. Uh, hello, it's me. Same as it ever was. It's been too long. How am I? I'm I'm living the good life. I'm living the Aristotelian ideal out here. um, um, I mean, life's good. I just I attended a poetry workshop this morning, which is pretty badass. I learned some things about repetition from some poet who's a professor in maybe Canada. Their name is Jamie McCarty. I hadn't heard of them, but their workshop is on the same series of workshops that mine will be on at the end of this year through the local county arts organization. Um, so it's always good to learn things. What's that flag behind me? That's like the redesigned polyamory flag. Uh, which I hang on my wall proudly as like a not polyamorous person. As a whatever I am. I don't know. Um, does Aristotle have an ideal good? I don't know. Maybe it's Plato or someone talks about the good life. I was just saying words really, but hello Ishmael. Uh, not as good as Plato. There you go. Um, so yeah, the workshop was about anaphora and epi ep, ep the similar thing to anaphora that's at the end of the line, and then some other technique called poly something, and then there was anadiplosis, anaphora, epistrophe, anadiplosis, and something else. And I learned some. I mean, I guess I learned some words. But there was some cool techniques, and it was sort of a generative workshop. So I wrote some things, and that's always good. It's good to be learning from other people. Uh, Other than that, yesterday, yesterday, um, yesterday, um, uh, yesterday I went to a coffee shop, and I'm sitting there. I'm sitting at the coffee shop. I'm reading Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, and this person comes up. They have like a service dog. They sit down. I say hi to the dog because they say the dog can say hi to me, and then I end up talking to this person for like 2 hours, and then some other guy comes up at the coffee shop and like basically joins our conversation, and he's like this like child savant guy who's like me but 50 years older, and we talked about all sorts of wild things like poetry and quantum physics in the education system uh, and other things, epistemology. That was cool. He told me like his whole life story, which is pretty badass. Um, so that was cool. I love talking to people. I enjoyed those conversations so much that I cried walking home. So that's what's been up with me. Tonight I'm going to a concert as a volunteer, but I'll probably get to catch some of the music. The concert being Yellow Card, Plain White Tees, and Newfound Glory, for the kind of before my time millennial pop punk. So that's cool. Um, that's life. And otherwise, we're gonna read poetry today. Um, you went to school with Anna Diplophis. Uh, I I I feel like, I mean, I think you're joking. I mean, because I don't know. Maybe there's a real person called Anna Diplophis, but anadiplosis is a literary technique. Um, yes, a classic literature poetry workshop class. Let's collect rhetoric tools like it's Pokemon. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like here's some new words. I like for my workshop, the workshop I taught, hopefully the workshop that I next teach, hopefully will not just be like here's some new techniques, because the last workshop I attended before this one was like a this is about alliteration and assonance and consonants, and that stuff's cool, but I spend a lot of time talking about those things, and it's always good to have like intentional practice. So I'm not gonna knock someone for teaching about uh, literary devices. Uh, that being said, you know it's like vocabulary words. Aristotle classifies ousia, abstract natures, and eidos, the units of existence separating things. That sounds like the good life to me. Uh, there's a reason cafes were called penny universities. Yeah, I kind of felt that when I was just talking to these people. I'm like it's pretty badass. Um, yeah. Um, and it was like a generative workshop, so we wrote some things, and that was all good. So I can't complain. Can't complain too much at all about life in general, and the passing on of time that is ever careening forward and tumbling into new being and whatever whatever this thing is that we call existence. I'm fine with it. I'm predominantly fine with it. If you're not fine with it, I think you're doing something wrong. So that maybe that's a hot take. Maybe that's a hot take that if you're not content in your life, it's like your fault. Maybe that's a bit rich. Maybe that's a really bad take. Because people cause each other a lot of suffering, and it's pretty nonsensical to say like, oh, just be happy, dude. That's kind of messed up. We're all a rough beast slouching toward Bethlehem. Yes. What's that? Ozymandias. That's also Joan Didion, right? That's her book of essays, Slouching Toward Bethlehem. Um, is that Ozymandias? I think it is. If it is, that makes me look literate. If it isn't, it makes me look like everyone else. Um, it isn't. Tough. Tough. We read it on stream, didn't we? It's the other one with the weird name, right? I think it's another one we're just gonna say it's a poem with a weird name. Alternatively, choose to be unhappy because the world is run by a satanic cult. True, true. But see, I can acknowledge that, right? And then I'm gonna choose to be happy because otherwise I'll be whatever. What is the poem? I don't remember what the poem's called. Stylish Fail. Rough beast slouching toward Bethlehem. Does it start with an M? It's a crazy poll. I feel there's kind of like an M vibe. Oh, the second coming. Yates. Yates. Gotcha. Okay, well, that was a good try. Who wrote Ozymandias? Shelley? One of them? Probably. Probably one of them. Someone wrote Ozymandias. Yates. Yeez. Um, Shelley did Ozzy. Okay, well, I'm doing okay then. I'm batting 500 at this point, and I'll take that. That's pretty good. Girl Shelley, which is, see, I don't actually. I know there's a Percy, I don't even know. And then there's other Shelley, um, which is Mary. That feels wrong. That feels like the wrong name. It's really just a shot in the dark. Oops, boy, Shelley. Yeah, I really thought it was Percy who wrote Aussie, but so it goes. Um, let's read poetry. I'm not here to drag my feet and slouch toward Bethlehem. I'm here to get into it. Uh, oh, it is Mary Shelley. Look at me. I'm so smart. Uh, who's here? Who has things submitted? Uh, Pinguino's had something submitted for a long time. If you've stuck around longer than just saying hi. Um, otherwise, I'd imagine the Fog Frog has something submitted, but it's probably not as old. Ray always has something. Nikki always has something. Is a safe assumption. Not that assumptions are safe ever. Assumptions bad. Assumptions dangerous. Um, yeah, you have like something up like a cross, right? Penguino, something about them, their religious symbolography, um, somewhere, way back, way back in the Wayback Machine, up on the cross. You want to read it? Down, down, Penguino. It's been so long since we read a Penguino poem. I kind of forgot what I wrote, gang, but we'll figure it out. You wrote up on that cross. You included a bunch of questions about it, which is super awesome. And it goes like, do you think he was happy up on that cross? Would you be happy? That poem. If you don't want me to read it, if it's now old and embarrassing, then we can always leave it to rot and molder in the crypt that is the past. Sure, okay. No rotting and moldering to be had then. We must imagine Jesus happy, right? There is something kind of Sisyphean about that opening, isn't there? Sisyphean. Sisyphus. You must imagine Sisyphus happy. It's not a choice. It's a reality. Yeah, poetry. Poetry. Poiesis. I'm just saying words today. Maybe it's because I already attended a poetry workshop, and like the poetry brain has been exerted in a non-nominal manner. Non-nominal, that's a good little poetic turn of phrase. Non-nominal. It's kind of neat. Someone should write a poem that does that. Not me, though. I don't write poems that do clever things. Up on that cross by Penguino, man. I'm so just saying words today. I'm so just making mouth noises. Dropping things. Yeah, this is gonna be a good one. I can tell. Like, can we zoom in far enough? Yes, we can. Can we zoom out far enough? Can we get the questions bigger? Bam. Poetry. Let's go ahead with the pseudo humiliation ritual. Don't call it that, Penguino, man. That makes me I mean, it doesn't really affect me. I'm 96% sure that you're joking, and if people thought that they were humiliation rituals, I don't think they'd send me their poetry. So I'll exist safely in my existence. Exist in my existence, yes. The only emotion we can canonically attribute to Christian Jesus is love. He is not always happy. He did weep. Very the coldest line in the Bible, coldest verse, Jesus wept. 2 words. I think it's the only one that short. I really dig that verse. Very cool. Not out of some disdain for Jesus or like sadistic joy that he's weeping. I think it is genuinely a beautiful sort of moment of that story. No, I have no disdain for the man himself, the big J. Just the people who maybe claim to follow him and do a lot of bad things to people, and are bad people, and are not following and hypocritical or whatever. Yeah, it's more valuable insight than humiliation ritual. Good. So you provided in your post a number of questions, which, I find that infinitely valuable and super cool, and everyone else should take notes about this sort of thing. I wanted this poem to come off as stronger, Question mark. There are a few ways I think we can explore that, but I have a few questions. Blurry as fuck. Who is he? Is one of the questions. Should he be more vague and ambiguous or more obvious? What direction would work best for the poem? Should the poem come off as accusational? If so, who are we accusing and what are we accusing them of? Religious commodification, fear-mongering, etc. Should the poem try to persuade, mourn, condemn, or document? Which images are earned, and which are just intense? That's a great question. I like that question. Some of them have a lot of baggage behind them. Others only elicit disgust. But which is which? I'm hoping for a second pair of eyes. And last, should the poem leave more space for interpretation? A bunch of big questions. Whether they are all things that we might answer in the course of, well, we definitely can answer all of them. It's just, it is a quite the extensive amount of ground to cover. That being said, we will try to address as many of these questions as we can, and see if we can get this poem or guide this poem to being, as you say, more. What did you say? Come off as stronger. Stronger. We want some strength here, and we shall see. He also gets angry when he sees people trading in the temple. He did do that. Jesus did do that. That's a banger moment. Also great moment of Jesus Christ Superstar, the musical slash movie of the musical. This being a pseudo-humiliation ritual turns Ginny being the dungeon master into something else entirely. Thank you for that, Ray. I mean, I didn't need to read that out loud, but you're here, Wombat, got dragged to an EDH game. That's about the worst thing you can do. Be dragged into. But I'm happy for you. Here is Up on That Cross by I Penguino Man. I won't speak that with such enthusiasm as you provided. But here goes. Do you think he was happy up on that cross? Would you be happy? Do you think he was happy down in that chair, mic in hand, body hunched over, violenced throat salivating red at the prospect of our ruin? They carry Bibles like campaign flyers, creased at the verses about judgment, untouched at the ones about the poor, every sermon a border wall, every prayer a ballot cast in fear, senators selling terror by the shekel. A blonde in blue jeans, telling us they're poisoning our blood. They wrapped the cross in the flag just to put wheels beneath it when it was dragged. The crowd opened its mouth like a bone, exposed wound, tongues lacerated with scripture, teeth lacquered in cable news light. Children learned to gargle ash before water. Old men coughed black hymnals into their fists. On screens, prophets peeled the skin from mercy and called the raw meat patriotism. Down in that chair, up on that cross, in that moment, he accomplished everything he set out to do. What greater joy could there be? So this is a Charlie Kirk poem. Hell yeah. A lot of cool. We are Charlie Kirk. Yeah. um, I also wrote a Charlie Kirk poem. I think that day. Um, uh, lots of very powerful moments in this, and you know, it's interesting because like this is a Charlie Kirk poem, and it's also not a Charlie Kirk poem. Maybe, right? You have this like broadening to the American evangelical Christian, broadly, that sort of group, right? Where we get the they and we get this sort of collective, and we get maybe the blonde in blue jeans. Is Erica Kirk blonde? I don't even know. Maybe it's just generic. Maybe there's other blondes in blue jeans that I'm not thinking of in American politics. Uh, but either way, right? We're going generally kind of outside of Charlie Kirk, more to the movement, more to the American patriotic Christo nationalist right. Um, I think that's good, right? That's nice. It like broadens our political context. I also think, you know, it's maybe a difficult thing to do. And, by that I mean just that, right, we have this idea of wanting the poem to come off stronger. And the more ground we cover, right, the more ground we cover with different things, probably like the stronger we have to be because we're going in a lot of different directions. And I don't think this poem like loses focus necessarily. That can happen, but this one's pretty like straight on, pretty efficient, pretty lean. Um, but we'll read it again. We'll not get too ahead of ourselves. Oh, the wheels under the cross. Is that about those people that walk with the crown of thorns and the cross, etc., but they put wheels under the cross? Yeah. Yeah, I think I saw like a short the other day that was like a couple guys doing that, and they were like handing out burritos to like homeless people, and they were like pulling the whole ass cross, which is like kind of just crazy work. But it was on wheels, so sort of really strange, like just absurd kind of thing, right? To make oneself Christ-like, and like that's a moment of suffering, and they're like handing out burritos. I don't know, it's sort of weird. But here's up on that cross one more time. Do you think he was happy up on that cross? Would you be happy? Do you think he was happy down in that chair, mic in hand, body hunched over, violenced throat salivating red at the prospect of our ruin? Why is that so big? Violenced. They carry Bibles like campaign flyers, creased at the verses about judgment, untouched at the ones about the poor, every sermon a border wall. I love this going on. Every prayer a ballot cast in fear, senators selling terror by the shekel. You do some lovely like sonic things in this stanza, right? They carry Bibles like campaign flyers, creased. So we have this like campaign, creased S flyers, verses about judgment, untouched. So we get this judge touch kind of thing. At the ones about the poor, every sermon a border, right? So we get like poor, border, sermon, every prayer a ballot cast in fear, prayer, fear, cast, senators selling, terror, right? By the shekel. Just lots of good sounds. Yes, I also love violenced throat. I underline that just because in the same way that we've sort of adjectived a noun, right? And I really love when we do this in poetry, when we just uh, use words sort of as we wish, and break the rules in these small ways, right? Violence, of course, also very, very witty, because there's the whole like that was gun violence, and there was the whole counting or not counting gang violence, right? Which was a question about gun violence, and so you get like the little witty remark at that, um, which is like a lovely little rhetorical move. um, Throat salivating red uh, does such a nice job of pointing ahead, kind of far ahead, but we get to this like raw meat kind of like craving thing going on later, right? Um, and maybe like I really like that, right? We have this like gargling ash. We have this like um, raw meat of patriotism, right? And we kind of have the blood, which goes along with this salivating, bodily, eating, drinking kind of thing that we have going on. And uh, maybe there could be more of that. Maybe a stronger like metaphorical through line of the body, right? And Christ, obviously there's this sort of like blood and like flesh thing going on with Christ, right? Um, there's a lot of food imagery, food and drink imagery that surrounds Christ, and maybe that's you know like it's getting ahead of myself, right? I'm looking to these questions, um, that you want the poem to come off stronger, right? And oftentimes in a spoken poem, like you say, something that moves very fast, having like a through line metaphor that you keep coming back to, right? Uh, is is good, right? Because it keeps punching you in the face, and to use something like meat, to use something like food, eating, this consumptive desire, this craving, right? These are really strong words that you do point to. Um, even something like about the poor, if this was about the hungry, and then sort of I mean, you have poor shekel, right, which works here in a vacuum together, right? Um, so that's not bad, right? Like poor shekel, the selling, right? These things work nicely together, and then like flyers to senators. This is like a really tight stanza. Um, but yeah, that's sort of me just going into speculation mode and idea mode. Um, a blonde in blue jeans. So is I feel like Erica Kirk is blonde. Look at me looking up the blues scale because I never remember it. Um, Erica. Yeah. Okay, that might be the blonde in blue jeans that we're referring to. Um, Had to check. It's been so long. When was Charlie Kirk? That's a really. When did that happen? How long ago was this now? Was this like 6 months? August, I think. Maybe September. So we're coming up on 1 year of We Are Charlie Kirk. That's September. Okay. So we've got some time still. June. That makes sense. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah. That tracks. That makes sense. I wonder if they're going to have like a big We Are Charlie Kirk memorial thing going on. Blonde in blue jeans reads to me as white America. Yeah, and I think that's generally it's probably working in double where it can be specifically Erica since she was very big in like the music that's music in the media presence after that, um, but then also just America, also the idea of maybe like just influencer in general, right? Like blonde person telling you they're poisoning the blood, right? You know. But this is, you know, maybe pointing toward like some like anti-vax chemtrail kind of situation. I had someone talking to me about that in the park the other day. He came up to me and I was walking my dog barefoot. Um, Oh, I'm not sure if I should spoil it, but we're talking about Sydney Sweeney here with the American Eagle ad, right? And she was talking about it was the ad with the jeans, and then but she was talking about I have good genes. Yeah, um, I forgot about that one. That was kind of a blip in the in all of that, right? Um, wasn't I didn't really pay much attention to that whole moment. Okay, a blonde in blue jeans. I think it could be any all of these. They wrapped the cross in the flag just to put wheels beneath it when it was dragged. I like this, the sort of cheapening and convenience and all of that. The crowd opened its mouth like a bone-exposed wound, tongues lacerated with scripture, teeth lacquered, lacerated to scripture to lacquered, and cable news light. Children learned, lacerated, lacquered, learned. Children coughed, gargled, ash, black, hymnals, prophets peeled. Your screens, skin. You're doing so much. Uh, Prophets, patriotism, prophets, peeled patriotism. You're doing so much sound here. This is definitely like uh, just kind of like banger sound stuff overall, right? Uh, really cool and very visceral, right? I love your verbs. uh, Opened is fine. You know, the crowd opened its mouth like a bone exposed wound, tongues lacerated, right, with scripture, teeth lacquered in cable news lights. Children learned to gargle ash before water. Men coughed black hymnals into their fists on screens. Prophets peeled, right? We're using these great verbs, and I think that gives this a real intensity, a real drive, a real hunger, you know? Hunger. It really pushes. So I dig that. And then we go from this, you know, real intensity back to down in that chair. Right. And that's very nice. We get this reiteration, we get this kind of punch of the return. Up on that cross in that moment he accomplished everything he set out to do. What greater joy could there be? Right? And like this whole framing is really cool, right? Uh because this poem isn't really asking the question of like the questions like do you agree with the Kirkenuenly, right? Like do you, you know, what's your position, right? What's your opinion? This poem doesn't really like totally engage with that, um, which is cool, right? Because there's been enough of that. But it asks, I think, a much more interesting and like the personal question, right? Of he, right? This would you be happy? Was he happy? Right? And this sort of question of like accomplishing what he set out to do. Um, it's I don't think a poem, well, I think this is a poem that leaves me contemplating, right? Because it asks this really big, abstract question about martyrdom and faith and accomplishment and success and uh, sort of like what it means to have died well and or poorly or all of that. Objectively, he didn't accomplish his goals yet, though. Yeah, and there's that thing as well, right? This line is like he still needs to come back. Referring to Christ. I thought you were saying that Charlie Kirk is gonna get resurrected, which would be pretty wild. um, that he accomplished everything he set out to do is, yeah, I guess then doubly interesting because there's sort of the question of if Christ has done that, which one argument is no, because he still has to come back. Like scripturally, that's what happens. And then like Charlie Kirk, right? Even in a similar way, right? Like he's died and he's done his martyrdom, and this martyrdom is maybe seeking to create a kingdom, right? To be very Christian, right? About it. A kingdom in America that represents the values he fought for, right? In the same way that Christ wants to, bring people to a kingdom of God. And maybe that, like, I'm unsure that people would predominantly agree with this line uh, regarding either of the figures. And I think like writing poetry that's like maybe representing a person or an event, you want to report accurately, probably, right? Report the religion accurately, report the event. I like that it is more clear than ambiguous. Oh, you're talking. I like this more clear than ambiguous, especially for something with a very strong thesis. Yeah. Um, and I so and it's a very useful line for you poetically. Right, down in that chair, up on that cross, in that moment of death, in that moment of martyrdom, it is that moment where you sort of give that ultimate faith and gift to your mission and your goal. And I think to be a martyr has to be one of the most honorable ways within any cause to to sort of support or to pursue that cause, uh, where martyrs are the sort of the most honored. Um, so that sort of like highest sacrifice, could be construed as right. The accomplished everything you set out to do. I don't think it's like wrong or bad necessarily. I think it's an interesting thing that maybe makes one stumble over the full message. But maybe that is just part of the invitation to ponder this poem, to say something that's strong and poetic and not entirely true, right? To invite your reader to ponder, like, what did he accomplish? Was there anything accomplished in that death? And I mean, would he be happy with that death? Would he have been happy in that moment? Was he talking to Jesus as he bled out? Uh, that kind of stuff. Uh, yeah. As a Christian myself, this poem hits me in all the right ways. I'm angry about how frequently my religion is perverted and appropriated as a means to whatever evil somebody wants. Jesus advocated for loving all, not all except for this group and that group. Charlie Kirk did a lot of harm to Christianity by way of using it as his scapegoat. Type shit, furry combat wombat. Uh, yeah. Yeah, and I think this poem definitely, right, points to those things in a number of ways. It points to that with like the sort of corporatism, the capitalism of American Christianity, and this sort of like supremacy, this ethno sort of thing going on, and this sort of like indoctrination. He's just saying words wrong. Indoctrination, and something in service of a country rather than sort of its own belief and faith. So it's doing a lot very, very well. I would agree. Charlie Kirk Resurrection sounds about on par with 2026 we've had so far. Yeah, I could see it. I could see it. I I I think it'd be pretty dope. It's not on my bingo card, and that would be good. Um, there were people earnestly thinking he would start the rapture. Well, yeah, right. He, uh, you know, I think other people probably saw this same connection in a more reverent way of Kirk as the martyr and the savior, right? I like that it's more clear than ambiguous. I like the amount of clarity, right? I don't think one. I think in a political poem, in a poem that's sort of making protest towards something specific, you don't want to lose your reader at what you're talking about or have them really be struggling and solving the puzzle to realize this is a Kirk poem, right? If Charlie comes back before Big J, I'm gonna be so pissed. Same. Jesus said it is finished, so he did. And Charlie Kirk said, counting or not counting gang violence. Yeah, maybe a slight difference there. Uh, Going to get a Charlie Kirk resurrection before GTA 6. Yeah. Erica would be so mad. Da, 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 da. Especially with him saying it's worth the cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths so that we can have a Second Amendment. Yeah, I mean, there's an immense amount of irony in his death, and I think this poem, uh, I almost like that this poem doesn't call to that irony. This poem is sort of earnest in its own way, right? That it's talking. It's generally focused on him and the effects that he had in America and the way people perceive him, and it doesn't sort of call specifically to like the irony. It is kind of cool, except for the little nod with violenced throat, right? Indoctrination is the new word of the day. Yeah, thank you. Oh, the indoctrination that we live in. I feel like it. Indoctrination. Yeah, it's pretty clever. um, so I mean, this poem's a banger, right? This poem is very, very tight. I wonder. So I'm gonna go to your questions, right? Because you have these questions of like, should this poem come off as accusational, right? And this poem, I think, whenever you point out some sort of like hypocrisy, if you point out some sort of, uh, you know, maybe less than ideal morality in others, like that's probably fairly accusatory, right? And this poem is accusing a sort of a large group of people of practicing a perverted Christianity, as Wombat said, and a Christianity that cares more about a number of things that aren't Christianity. And you have this question, right? Should it? Should it try to persuade, mourn, condemn, or document? And I think that's really like something for you to choose. Because whenever something occurs, whenever something occurs, we can create art about it, and we can create art in a number of ways that are all valid. Right? We could have a poem about Charlie Kirk's death that is trying to persuade, right? Maybe you could write a poem trying to persuade that Charlie Kirk was a good guy. You could certainly write a poem to mourn Charlie Kirk. You could write a poem to condemn the act or to condemn him. You could write a poem that is very, right, documenting. And I think we see this in throughout poems. I think of "O Captain, My Captain," right, which is a poem that is mourning Abraham Lincoln so abstractly that it doesn't condemn the killer or point to anything like that. We see poems like, I don't know if I can think of more examples that are relative to big historical events. We read a poem related to 9/11 on stream number of streams ago that Asher had sent. Tissue by Imtiaz Darker. And this poem was more like looking forward, suggesting another way to live. Not so much occupying grieving, but maybe like pointing out the errors of humans' ways and like offering a different approach, right? And that's a way to write tragedy. We can think of I'm trying to think of more poems like this, but I'm drawing blanks beyond those two. I mean, even earlier we mentioned The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats, and that's like condemning the shifts in society. So no matter what, right, the tone with which we write something is our choice. But it's still an interesting question. Yeah, in earlier drafts, I was accusational of like the lobbyists or even people just participating in the culture war, but it felt like a cheap hit. Yeah, I mean, I think the question. So the fact that feels like a cheap hit, I think tells you something, right? It tells you that to you, right, to you, Penguino Man, that's not the point, right? The point isn't to condemn in that way. Like those maybe broader systems and groups of people. Although you do also still kind of call out a lot of the culture war type people. And I wonder, like, as I read this poem, like, I feel two very distinct things happening, right? A sort of tension in this poem. And one is this really kind of touching, earnest question. Earnest is the word I used earlier. Do you think he was happy? Right? This look at, like, the man, right? Not anything around it, not any of the consequence, the situation, but, like, him, right? Was he happy? And that's all of this. Do you think he was happy in the chair as he died, right? And like he accomplished everything. What greater joy could there be? That's almost a poem in of itself. And then we have this other poem happening, is kind of how I feel, that it's this big condemnation of this like American authoritarian Christian movement, Christo-fascism, we'll say. And as you condemn Christo-fascism, I mean, it does something very useful, right? It says, like, I think it subtly asks another question. If he knew, right, what he created, and that he created something sinister and dangerous and hateful, and if he died happy knowing that, or if he was ignorant to his own sort of effect, so blinded, so lost in his own sauce that he could just be happy. That's a way to read this poem. Uh, but I think uh, at the same time, it almost feels like a change of subject to me, where we're like asking about Kirk, and then we cut to all of the sort of um, I mean, really well written, but almost generic critiques. And you know, I'm being critical in this way, Pinguino, because you're a very good writer and you've sent your poetry before, and I feel like you can probably maybe understand where I'm coming from with this. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're like, what the fuck is Imogen talking about? Because I think this poem is like really, really well written. So I'm, you know, sort of trying to go past that. Um, but you just have like, you know, uh, American right critique, really well written, all of these things, really strong imagery, right? But it doesn't feel like it's textually tied into the Kirk thing, right? You know what I mean? Like, we're like, do you think he was happy? Do you think he was happy? Prospect of our ruin, right? Like, dying, bleeding out. Do you think he was happy? And then it just cuts to they, right? And a blonde and the crowd. And then it's like back to him. Uh, and it's a cool juxtaposition. Like, I sort of there is something neat about that, that it's like the smallness of man, right, and his singular being against like the vast ripples of his effect. That's a really cool thing this juxtaposition does, right? And one could say maybe that's like the point of this poem here, to show, you know, a human becoming more than they can handle, and becoming a symbol, right? This is maybe the idea of like the Christ like martyrdom, right? And maybe all of this does a really good job at illustrating how he is Christ, right? Because he is a single man, and Christ was man as much as he was God. Um, and he sort of within that, you know, belief had this repercussion on everything, right? Um, and I think this does do a good job of you know, doing that. But then at the same time, like, you have like the Sydney Sweeney thing, and that was kind of like the same time. But like the Sydney Sweeney thing was like maybe feels adjacent, right? This stuff maybe feels all very Kirk in some capacity. Uh, you know, all of this sort of corporate Christian stuff, all of this, you know, um, political, right, sort of corruption and whatever. Uh, but then this like, as you said, even more so, maybe side character is a way that it could be read. Um, and that might take away, right, some of the impact, if you're looking for that impact, right? Because we're you know, kind of the scope maybe gets out of your own control, which is maybe an interesting meta analysis, which one could say is effective in its own right. Uh, Though I would argue that this poem, if asking about was he happy, it should probably mention that he was a father with kids. And maybe that's why I jumped to Erica Kirk with the blonde. I feel like that is a loose end in this poem. I can't be sure, but I imagine he would not be happy about the concept of leaving his kids behind. Right? And that would fit very nicely in this sort of intimate section of the poem, right? But like mentioning his children alongside all of this might get really sort of just like tonally dissonant. And maybe that's something you could lean into. You can lean into the fact that like he is a a husband and a man, and he has kids, and maybe underneath all of like the awful shit he says, there's some like notion, some desire for good that like Christianity has, right? And then it's just like become this thing, this sort of uh thing that mutated into something evil and awful. Um and that could be kind of cool to continually juxtapose like a man and a human, and then like these rippling vast effects. That could be a really powerful push and pull. It could also be a whole poem that really looks into this like this smallness, this specific kind of angle. And I think in a poem like this, I think in a political poem, uh specificity can be very powerful. Normally I draw the specificity curve, and I say that, you know, all of this, anything on here, works well. For those who have not seen the specificity curve, um, specificity graphed on X, interpretations graphed on Y. As we get more specific, there are less ways to interpret a poem. As we get less specific, there are more ways to interpret a poem. As we get hyper specific, we get toward like a single, unavoidable interpretation, right? And I think sometimes when we get too vague in poems, right, as we get really, as we're very vague, I think when that happens in like a political poem, it feels like this just like calling out the same things that everyone's been calling out. And it does that very like uninteresting, like falling on deaf ears, where it's just like every other Instagram story that, we would have seen at the time, every other TikTok talking about it. And, if so when we do something political, I think often we have to be powerful or specific or subversive to be effective, right? It has to punch in a way that the rest of the overwhelming political discourse and media cycle doesn't, and that's probably why uh, poetry, really just probably struggles to compete in the marketplace of uh, politics, because you have to punch louder than maybe uh, the 24-hour news cycle or whatever. uh, that's some thoughts. Personally, I see it as more corruption being paid by Israeli lobby. There are no innocent sacrifice unless you count victims of the terror. It doesn't quite mirror. Personally, I see it more as corruption slash being paid. Israeli lobby. There are no innocents sacrificed unless you count the victims of the terror. It doesn't quite mirror. Oh, and you're replying to the thing about the shekels, maybe. Anyway. Yeah, like in some ways he still represents a sort of ideal nuclear family. Right, yeah. That the Christian right sets out for. Yeah, wife, right? Kids. His name's Charlie, right? She's blonde. He was part of a nuclear family. I don't really see him as a shining example of a family man. I mean, we're also not, maybe none of us occupy probably like the right and their perception. But I'm pretty sure, they probably like look at him as this great father, right, with children and a wife, and so probably within that space he does. Weird thing to think about. It started off as a job interview, but he want to turn it into date. That is kind of wild, right? Totally get what you mean. There are more nuanced perspectives to be explored in poetry that would be better to lean into. Maybe. So which images are earned and which are just intense? I think I'll just sort of go to this question. We sort of answered this one. Um, Although, that being said, uh, so this is a hard question to answer, right? This, should the poem leave more space for interpretation? Because, like, I mean, I already sort of drew this graph, and maybe I sort of have an opinion, but also, like, these big questions are, like, fundamentally interpretive, and this poem does leave, like, a lot of good room for interpretation. Uh, and it could actually be more, like, if we really leaned into these, like, really big questions, I think there are ways that this poem could be more interpretive. But number three, right, which images are earned and which are just intense? Uh, I feel like a lot of this description of like the throngs of the masses are really nice, right? Like even though they're very intense and they're very strong, like it's fitting. Uh and I think this stanza most so. I really like the imagery. Um I like this like wrapped the cross to put wheels beneath it. Uh, I already sort of mentioned my thought on like the Sydney Sweeney call out maybe as tangential. Um, I think these are the strongest images. I think they're really cool. I already talked about how I really like this meat, this mouths, this body kind of thing, right? And you've done this before, Pinguino, where you you have this capacity to write the human body incredibly potently. And I don't necessarily want to just like keep nudging you back in that direction because it is worth it to do different things. But I think there is a really powerful poem here that just leans into like the meat and blood and bodies and the hungering masses and the gargling ashes and the all of that, right? Cuz like it's a great image and it's very powerful. Uh but I think really it's just about like taking these different directions and asking yourself, where you want to go with it and how you want to tie it together or if you want to change anything. Cuz yeah. uh cuz there's a number of ways you can go with this, and already like the poem is very strong. So uh, that's something. Who is he? Who are we? We are Charlie Kirk. Uh, I get that. Different tools in the toolbox to explore. Absolutely, absolutely. On leaving room for interpretation, I think it hits harder because it's more concrete. Yeah, the imagery and the concreteness of the imagery is very good. I also think there's like an inherent hard hittingness of the questions themselves and the sort of direct offering to the reader to like ponder a question, to actually engage with it. I think that's a really nice thing to do in general, probably in a modern political poem. I feel like one could really easily write a strong modern political poem that's just saying like, what did you actually think about blank? What did you actually think about blank? What did you actually think about blank? With each blank being filled in as like an event in the modern media news cycle, just as like a calling out of the tendency to like adopt the opinions of those around you. Like actually inviting the reader to like form a nuanced opinion and like think about something for a second is a very powerful thing to do, especially within poetry that like is already inviting you to think and consider. uh, Creates a really strong contrast against how politics and media and news is presented most often. uh, I don't think you'd want to get more vague in terms of like Charlie Kirk being the subject. It's more of a statement, not a wishy-washy centrist opinion piece. Yeah, right. It definitely like condemns all of this. It's just the, you know, balancing that with like the other message. Uh I was on the alt-right in middle school. Wild. Most of the fathers in that sphere are the type that play catch with their son, take their daughter to get their ears pierced, listen to their problems when life gets hard. Most of them don't know how messed up and backward their views are. Understandable, right? They care about the family. Most are good people brainwashed with poor politics and taught to dig their heels in at the first sight of resistance and views. Yeah, I mean it's this like perfection within the norm where you can have your like happy Christian family, right? And everything is fine as long as everything is fine, right? And it stops being fine as soon as, right, like the kid is gay or like there's a Mexican person in my white homogenous town, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense as an explanation, and that's probably a very good one. Well, I mean, you lived it, right? Um, but yeah, it's also I always have like a slight hang up, right? Whenever we do the like, I love the imagery, right? Of like, um, well, I think actually you do a good job here. Something that I bristle at sometimes is when people like blame, right? Let's say like that father who has been brainwashed, indoctrinated, propagandized into a belief. I'm very very hesitant to like ever blame someone for their own beliefs. Um, and maybe that sounds generous and charitable of me, and I think this poem actually does a good job of considering that, right? Children learned to gargle ash before water, right? So it's like they don't get the opportunity uh, to form their own opinions, right? We have the teeth lacquered in cable news light, um, lacerated with scripture, right? To be sort of taught and have this thing imposed on the tongue itself so that everything spoken would be scarred with that reality. Um, like, I like a lot of this representation because it is kind of on an underlying level, maybe able to be read charitably toward the individuals. Um, I think that's good. I like raw meat. It's intense. It's not balanced, but it's like strong, and I just love that imagery, man. Raw meat. Come on, like that's so good. Not really for me. More that I appreciate people taking a stance and not hiding. Yeah. And that makes sense. Yeah, it's regrettably tragic. Yeah. Um, yeah, and I think that's why I think there are two poems here. I can see your message in YouTube chat, Esme. That's kind of why I feel like there's two poems here, or that there needs to be some more stuff to tie them together. Um, because one is like the strong condemnation, two themes, right? To strongly condemn and to ask about the man. Um, and I think those can happen in the same poem, but like I think there needs to be more if that's the case, maybe. More time, more weaving, or they can split. Maybe. Maybe I'm just tired and critical because I am tired. Patriotism is the skinless mercy. Prophets peeled the skin from mercy and called the raw meat. Ah, yeah, patriotism is. So, pulling the skin from mercy. You take mercy, you peel the skin off. Prophets peeled the skin from mercy and called the raw meat patriotism. That's a seriously one to unpack. If I prophets peeled the skin from mercy. So the skin of mercy. Skin is often appearances or like the surface. It's almost like, hmm, mercy, patriotism. I mean, there's like this sort of, I mean, maybe like imperialist pointing towards, uh, right? This notion of like mercy and a great nation and saviorism. I think that's kind of what that seems to say to me. On screens, prophets peeled the skin from mercy. So maybe back to the cable news. Peeled the skin from mercy, called the raw meat patriotism. That's kind of a complicated line. Um, I didn't think I'd be this tired. I guess the workshop was quite a bit. Um, I read it as taking away protection, leaving raw flesh. Yeah. Maybe it's that sort of like mask off kind of situation. That you'll see where sometimes there's this effort to keep the appearance of kindness and mercy, and sometimes it's just this uh and sometimes it's just patriotism and we are great and we are better, and there's not even the illusion of mercy, right? All this talk about patriotism, where's the matriotism, right? That's what I'm saying. um I don't know. I need to not wear the headphones. That's probably why. It is the motherland, yeah. Um okay. Any Do you have any other questions, Ishmael? Not Ishmael, Penguino Man. Uh, any other? Like, I think I touched on all of these questions. I, sort of. Or does anyone else have questions or comments or that kind of thing? uh, uh, yeah. I'm just I am lacking in volition, mental volition. You're okay. Explaining the peeling line. Sure. I think when I wrote it, I meant to criticize how ideology can corrupt compassion. Okay. People who present themselves as moral authorities, prophets stripping away mercy, removing compassion, tenderness, or empathy until it's exposed or destroyed. Stripping away mercy, removing compassion, and then all that is left is this like underlying force. I like that, right? Because the initial thing, maybe with patriotism, is this like perverse notion of like, well, we're like great as a nation, so we want to like do good for others. And it has this idea of like the light on the hill, this nation for the other nations, and then you pull away that mercy, and then it's just like we are great and we are superior, and that's what the mercy is really like hiding. So patriotism is mercy without compassion, tenderness, and empathy. I think I mean, maybe I misread what. When ideological leaders justify cruelty or emotional numbness in the name of the country, they strip away humanity. They strip away humanity and label the resulting harm as virtue, patriotism. Badass. When ideological leaders justify cruelty or emotional numbness in the name of the country, they strip away humanity, right? They don't have mercy. Peel the skin from mercy. I wonder if that's like the semantic issue there. Uh, Feel the skin from mercy, right? Because then you're sort of saying like the skin that is on mercy, right? Whereas maybe the skin of mercy, like the skin that is mercy, would help us understand that you take away the mercy and you just get raw and blunt and brutal patriotism, right? I think that's what you're trying to say, though. I sort of am moving slowly right now. Um, I think that's how I'm understanding it. Welcome in, Kutara. uh, so the meat stands for peeling. There is synecdoche. Guys using words. I don't have room for learning more words today. Why do we figure of speech in which the name of a part is used as stand-in for the whole. As hand for sailor. The whole for part is in law for police officer. Ah. I feel like chat's taught me that before. I think there's another weird aspect of like how language and the idea of being virtuous Christian can sanitize violence and hate. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if much will make sense to me, but I mean, write what makes sense to you, and that's what I would encourage strongly. There are flies buzzing around my face right now. It's really unpleasant, dude. Go away. Raw meat also has the additional connotation of the naturalist fallacy, the most raw meat, raw organs, people on the alt-right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I did have that thought, right? The carnivore diet people. Um, but there's also even this idea, some people on the right will use this idea of sort of like might makes right and natural selection and this sort of like pure raw strength that says like, well, our government is strong and we are a strong nation, and so that justifies our action. Like I've experienced someone trying to argue exactly that in my chat. It was kind of a fun conversation. um, but so I do think raw meat works on a number of levels in terms of how it can be interpreted. I do agree with that. Any Ingsoc needs to keep giving us enemies to justify our strongman leader to protect us. What is Ingsoc? Oh, is that's from Ingsoc. Is that from 1984? Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Remember Monsters Regiment by Pratchett? It reminds me of the patriotism for Borogravia. Yeah, I feel like I don't remember a ton of that book. I don't remember things well. But yeah, there was that very like patent sort of or tacit, right? The very tacit acceptance of patriotism at all, like regardless, without thought. It was assumed. Yeah. Also, I think you answered the questions well. I'm struggling to come up with more. We touched a lot of areas. Okay, I am very glad that through my semi-delirious state, that some value has been found. um, I do think it's a very strong poem, and I just, you know, gave some things to push you, hopefully. So shall we get a palette streamer? So shall we get a palette cleanser before the rest of stream? Maybe some pictures of puppies. We'll at least get a break after we read this poem because there will be a break. So I'm going to read this, and then there's going to be a lovely advertisement, and then we'll see what happens after that. If I can rally, I'm going to get some water and some food, and then we'll see. But thank you for the stream. Thanks for coming by, Stylish. Here's Up on That Cross. Again. Do you think he was happy up on that cross? Would you be happy? Do you think he was happy down in that chair? Mic in hand, body hunched over, violenced throat salivating red at the prospect of our ruin. They carry Bibles, like campaign flyers, creased at the verses about judgment, untouched at the ones about the poor, every sermon a border wall, every prayer a ballot cast in fear, senators selling terror by the shekel. A blonde in blue jeans telling us they're poisoning the blood. They wrapped the cross in the flag just to put wheels beneath it when it was dragged. The crowd opened its mouth like a bone exposed wound, tongues lacerated with scripture, teeth lacquered in cable news light. Children learned to gargle ash before water. Old men coughed black hymnals into their fists on screens. Prophets peeled the skin from mercy and called the raw meat patriotism. Down in that chair, up on that cross, in that moment, he accomplished everything he set out to do. What greater joy could there be? Up on that cross by Penguino. Yeah, banger. It's a good poem. It is very strong. And I think it does punch, and like the imagery is so strong that it just, yeah, it's intense. I'll be back in 3 minutes. We will take a break. Thank you so much for submitting, Pinguino. I always appreciate reading your work and reading everyone else's work. It's such a lovely privilege to be able to do so. I'll be back in a second. I think we're back. Stream dropped during the break, I think. Hopefully we've all found our way back into this place. Um yeah, that happens sometimes. Welcome back to all of you. Yeah, I guess. See, so right before this, I attended a poetry workshop, and that was 2 hours long, which means like 2 hours of sitting and staring at my computer screen with the headphones on and, doing poetic things. Uh, and then to like immediately go from that to sitting and staring at a computer screen, um, talking about poetry. Kind of a lot, maybe. Because really, I probably feel like I'm like 3.5 hours into stream, even though we're only an hour and a half into stream. Uh, yeah, yeah. I think that's why. I played saxophone this morning, which is nice. I don't think that really tired me out. That was just kind of fun. I was doing a really cool thing, a very cool exercise, and maybe if any of you are instrumentalists and improvisers, you can try this. I was applying poetic techniques to jazz solos, um, which was a really cool thing to play around with. So I was thinking about the idea of alliteration. Right, alliteration is beginning, lines, sentences, words with the same letter, right? And in music, right, we have notes, and notes are letters. And I thought it was really, so I tried to play with like alliterating my phrases, and I would go through like a whole verse, a whole chorus of the song, and start on the same note, and then I'd get to like the next chorus, and I just go up a half step, and then I'd alliterate on that note for the whole chorus, and then I do it through all 12 notes chromatically. And it's really cool because it forces you to like start phrases on these like chromatic notes that you'd never think to start on, and then it can often work very well. And I was playing a blues, and you get very chromatic in the blues, so that was really cool. Um, in my very very productive morning, I guess. Uh, so that was pretty nifty. Um, I think we can do that a lot. I think you could rhyme in a jazz solo. I think you can end your phrases in the same way, and I think you could probably. I mean, repetition certainly is something you can employ in music, uh, which is neat. I think that's really cool. I think that's pretty dope. um, I have this scarf. This is I, I got a bunch of scarves from my neighbor, and I just like draping them around myself. I think that's really nice. I was wearing one of these yesterday as well. It might appear more often on stream. I just kind of like the vibe of being draped in a thing. It makes me feel safe and comfortable. Um, so that's good. And I don't know who else has things submitted. I mean, probably like all of you. I'm not entirely sure. How much capacity I have to read more stuff? Uh, I really think I don't. uh, yeah, I think that's what's happening. Uh, Sorry to run the ad and then be like, I'll come back, and then to come back and be like, fuck, I'm not gonna read anymore. But I just don't think I have energy to carry on streaming. So thank you all for tuning in to listen to Pinguino's poem. That was very nice. Very powerful poem. Very strong. very raw meat. And and there'll be another stream on Monday, and hopefully it will be more akin to the recent length that streams have been. You know, maybe more of a 3 hour, 4 hour stream, hopefully. But I can't promise anything because the future is not in my hands. Scammed, right? Scammed. Unsubscribe, unfollow, never come back. Leave the Discord server. Leave a hateful comment on Yelp. That's what I want you all to do. Um. So yeah, next stream will be on Monday at the usual time, and I should probably take a nap if I'm going to a concert later. So y'all can also take naps if you want to do that, if that's your style or your kind of thing. Uh, if not, then don't take the nap. Did stream die? Stream died, yes, and then it came back, and then I said like, okay, it died and it came back, and now we're just ending it anyway. Have fun at the concert. I hope to. I intend to. Yeah. Thank you all for stopping in. And Monday. Thanks for watching.